One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. What is terrorism? Obviously, a lot depends on whose point of view we are representing. Terrorist has often been used as an effective tactic for the weaker side of the conflict. The different types of terrorism were distinguished by the United States in the 1970s. Terrorism constitutes the illegitimate use of force to achieve a political objective when innocent people are targeted. Different types of terrorism. There are different types of terrorism such as bioterrorism, cyber terrorist, nuclear terrorism. Cyber terrorism, this means that they use information technology such as computer systems as a tool to orchestrate a traditional attack. Nuclear terrorism refers to things such as pursuing nuclear weapons or building nuclear weapons, or otherwise finding ways to disperse radioactive materials.
Many believe terrorism began after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. To them it was completely unexpected and unexplainable. However, if you research back almost a century ago, you can see the cracks between the East and the West beginning to show. Iraq is a nation of more than 20 million people and has the second largest proven stores of petroleum in the world, making it highly profitable for countries in the Western world such as the UK and the US. In 1917, we saw the invasion by the British of Iraq, making it a British mandate. Those who opposed faced brutality at its worst. They were put down by systematic aerial bombardment, the first of its kind to be used in history. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last. The border that surrounded Iraq was the result of the British and the French, who knew little of the tribal connections that were the cultural essence of the Middle East. America's interest in the Middle East grew after World War II due to the amount of oil the region had. The Middle East was serving as a pipeline for the British and the French empires prior to the war, but the US quickly came to dominate the petroleum resources of the region. In 1944, American corporations controlled over 40% of the Middle Eastern oil reserves. Iraqi-American relations reached their high point as Ayatollah Khomeini's Islamic Revolution took hold in Iran. The US saw Tehran, the capital of Iran, as its main adversary in the Middle East, as did Iraq. With huge levels of American support, over $40 billion in weapons and technology through the 1980s were provided to Iran. Iran and Iraq fought each other for almost a decade. During the battle's later stages, US officers provided intelligence and tactical advice to the Iraqis, whilst Baghdad were using chemical and biological weapons on the battlefield to suppress the Iranians. The war against Iran left Iraq with increasingly huge debts, which they could only pay through oil exports. In the past decade, many Iraqis have died, with some human rights groups putting the number close to 1 million, due to intolerable health conditions caused by the war and embargoes on basic medical resources. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, the Bush administration had been trying to build a consensus on attacking Iraq, offering various rationales for the need to invade Baghdad. Bush insisted that Saddam Hussein at the time had been exporting terrorism in conjunction with al-Qaeda, had been developing nuclear weapons and repressing his own people. When observed in historical perspective, current American invasions against Iraq have even less justification. The US have developed relations with Iraq to suit its own purposes, supporting regimes which harm their own citizens, encourage and funding wars against neighbouring states, and providing technology for weapons.
Fallujah. Fallujah is a city in Iraq which is based around the west side of Baghdad, and it's Muslim orientated.
The word Al-Qaeda has an Arabic meaning, the base. Al-Qaeda is basically a terrorist international organisation in which they have taken a different interpretation of the Islamic teachings. It is claimed that Osama bin Laden was the founder of this group since the 1980s. His aim for this organisation was to create Islamic militant groups worldwide in order to push the Western world out of the Middle East. As the Western world is seen as a threat to Islam, they believe that the West had a democratic institutions, and they believe that violence is the only response in staying loyal to the Muslim religion. The media have not helped by by publishing Al-Qaeda's negative contrast on Islamic ways of life, and have not taken into consideration that this is just one group of extremists within the Muslim religion. But we shall go into more detail later on in this presentation. So now we understand that Al-Qaeda has their own concept of the Quran, which does not represent the Muslim religion as a whole. MI5 have their own perspective that the organisation of Al-Qaeda believes that the Middle East have got a corrupted government with Western influences. Osama bin Laden is the main reason for the terrorist attacks on the USA, that it should withdraw its military forces and other interests from the Islamic Holy Land, which is the land of the two holy places. The two holy places are in Saudi Arabian cities of Mecca, which is Islam's most sacred city and second holiest place, where their Prophet Muhammad is buried. This makes us question, why are America there in the first place? It seems to be a misunderstanding when it comes to understanding how the organisation is run. The first idea has been portrayed that Al-Qaeda is a vast, highly structured organisation with Osama bin Laden in direct control of the terrorist plots around the world. And the second idea is that some have asserted that Al-Qaeda does not actually exist. It's just merely a brand name used to link unconnected terrorist groups. MI5 believe that there is not a monolithic organisation nor a brand name. Instead, it's a movement consisting of a network of networks, which they have broken down Al-Qaeda into three elements. Al-Qaeda is essentially the remand of original pre-9/11 Al-Qaeda organisation. It has been badly disrupted by the world campaign against terrorism, but it remains active in planning attacks and recruiting operatives like MI5 for the 2012 Olympics. Maybe the next, or the Queen's Jubilee could be at high risk this year. It appears that Al-Qaeda linked networks have the same idea with the core and work closely with each other to organise their next attack or threat. And the third element is when another terrorist group has the same ideas, methods and concept but are not entirely connected with Al-Qaeda. With the last element, it does seem that Al-Qaeda has become more of a title for terrorism.